my imagination of what you're thinking. So it's myself that I'm imagining is yourself. How many of us make that mistake, right? It must supersede this otherness of itself. This is the supersession of the first, I gotta stop that, ambiguity, and is therefore itself a second ambiguity. First, it must proceed to supersede the other independent being in order thereby to become certain of itself as the essential being. I'm the one that's important here, but I want to understand someone else, right? Secondly, in so doing, it proceeds to supersede its own self, for this other is itself. For while I'm trying to imagine what you're thinking, this imaginary self that I think of as you has superseded the importance of me thinking about myself. Right? This ambiguous supersession of its ambiguous otherness is equally an ambiguous return into itself. For first, through the supersession, it receives back its own self, because by superseding its otherness, it again becomes equal to itself. But secondly, right, we're doing this in our mind. This is moment by moment as I'm thinking about this. Now I'm thinking about that. Now, oh, wait a minute. Now I realize, well, that's not really that person. It's just my imagination. Because by superseding its otherness, it again becomes equal to itself. So I'm back to myself again, maybe. But secondly, the other self-consciousness equally gives it back again to itself, for it saw itself in the other. In other words, all this thinking that I'm doing about other people is happening in their minds as well. Because we're all self-consciousness is doing this, right? So this movement of self-consciousness in relation to another self-consciousness has in this way been represented as the action of one self-consciousness, me thinking, but this action of the one has itself the double significance of being both its own action and the action of the other as well. We're both doing this, right? I'm going out on a date, I try to date someone, I love the comics where the two guys go out and no one is interested in them at all. Whenever they say anything, the others are trying to think what's the best way to tell these people to fuck off, basically, without saying it that way, right? So for the other is equally independent and self-contained, and there's nothing in it of which it is not itself the origin. The first does not have the object before it merely as it exists primarily for desire, but as something that has an independent existence of its own, which therefore it cannot utilize for its own purposes. If that object does not of its own accord do what the first does to it, thus the movement, this is a movement he calls it, is simply the double movement of the two self-consciousnesses. Each sees the other do the same as it does. Each does itself what it demands of the other, and therefore also does what it does, only insofar as the other does the same. Action by one side only would be useless, because that what is to happen can only be brought about by both. Thus the action has a double significance, not only because it is directed against itself as well as against the other, but also because it is indivisibly the action of one as well as the other. In this movement we see repeated the process which presented itself as the play of forces. So this is spiritual forces that are playing between us, but repeated now in consciousness. What in that process was for us, is true here of the extremes themselves. The middle term, remember middle term is that connecting term in a syllogism, right? Is self-consciousness, which splits into the extremes, And each extreme is this exchanging of its own determinateness and an absolute transition into the opposite. Although as consciousness, it does indeed come out of itself. Now, so he's using his imagination to describe for us how he, I think, is imagining the interplay between the consciousnesses of several people, right? And by the way, this, in a sense, there's lots of authors that write about this as being ambiguous because it could be just me thinking to myself. Who's the other person here, right? I'm imagining, okay, find something, I'm thinking it, what are you thinking, right? I'm trying to imagine, what are you thinking, right? And we've got all kinds of hints, facial gestures, people throwing things at us like mud. Sorry. Did you see the king of Spain getting mud thrown at him? It was mud. Well, he visited the flooded area of Valencia, and the people started throwing mud at. I believe both him and his wife were there, and so they actually got hit with mud. Sorry. That was a squirrel. But it could be just me. So if I'm thinking, I'm a little hungry, let's see, there's a Mars bar. And I think to myself, Mars bars are not really good for you, right? So I imagine what I've got is like a little red angel, red, the one is the red, right? And and it says, no, don't eat that, it's bad for you, right? And the little blue one says, no, but you've eaten thousands of those, and you're still alive, and they taste good, and you're hungry. Why not have one? And then the red one says, no, it's bad for you. And then the blue one goes, smash. And I buy the candy bar and I eat it. Right? Or in this case, since I've already bought the whole bag for Halloween, never gave it out. I've got all these Snickers bars at home, right? So it could be me in the sense that in my self-consciousness, I have an argument going on with myself over whether or not I should eat the candy bar or not. And I can hear the side, I can hear my mother saying, don't eat the candy bar, it adds, all these bad things to you, and you want to live forever, and if you eat candy bars, you only live half of forever. You won't live long enough. So this dispute is going on within me, and who knows which side is going to win? I'm trying to actually imagine both sides in this argument in my head. So what I'm suggesting is, and it's not just me, that this whole dialogue that's going on, that he is describing as the relationship between two self-consciousnesses, could actually be happening just in my own mind, because I am self-conscious, and once that happens, I think of myself as having certain characteristics, including my self-consciousness. And so I often dialogue with myself. Should I get up? The alarm's going to go off any minute. I might as well turn it off and get up now. That way Donna won't be disturbed, right? That kind of dialogue. But I'm so sleepy. I think I'll just stay here. And then I think to myself, wait a minute, you're arguing with yourself over whether whose side are you on here? How far can you do this? In fact, there are people that end up with multiple personalities, right? And you can tell because, where's Dana? He says, there is no Dana, only Jules. Nobody gets that reference. It's Ghostbusters. It's Ghostbusters? What's Ghostbusters? Oh! I guess I have to retire. It's too late. I can't learn all the new movies.
There's too many movies to watch.
Too many movies.
I'm watching none, but there's too many. Those are bad.
Well, they're all the same.
Well, there's no common denominator for pop culture because there's so many coins. So there's like, in the 90s, a movie comes out, everybody watches that movie, and then they talk about it. But now a movie comes out, but only so much people watch. So there's no that coin.
And yet they're all the same, because there's only two plots. Tragedy and comedy. Oh well. So it could be just me that he's describing here, thinking to myself. Or it could be two people. Or it could be a person and a group. What are they thinking? Right? Know your audience. You think you can know your audience and everyone in the audience is all thinking the same thing. That's a mistake, because you've got different people, they're all thinking differently, but you might think to yourself they're all thinking this. And then of course if you go up a stage, what else is self-consciousness? Do you think there's a self-consciousness that Anchorage has of itself?
The Zeitgeist.
Oh, well, yeah, let's use some other German words. Like Zeitgeist is the spirit of the times. Zeit is time, right? Sein and Zeit, being in time, right? So Zeitgeist, spirit of the times. You could also say Weltgeist. The quiz question for today actually is, what did Hegel mean by the Weltgeist on a white horse? What was the Weltgeist on a white horse? Not coming up very well. So, shoot. This is Hegel with the Phenomenology under his arm. The book we're looking at, right? Because he actually mailed the second half of it by the post while Napoleon's forces were crushing the Prussians in Jena. Which also, by the way, destroyed the university. They closed, so he lost his job because he was teaching at the university. So did Hegel ever actually see Napoleon face to face on a white horse? Probably not. It might have been just, who knows? Who knows? He did see him, but the biography I read said that he was up in his apartment on the third floor looking down at the Napoleon riding by on a white horse. That makes more sense, actually, although who knows, right? In any case, why would Napoleon be the Weltgeist? Well, if we think, Zeitgeist means assume that there's actually a consciousness or a spirit of the times. Well, that's kind of hard for us to imagine because we live in a society where this dialectical process is absolutely magnificent. People complain, my goodness, our country is so torn up, because of these disputes we have over, left and right or whatever side you pick. But actually, what's happened is the technology has spread so that we have this social media where everybody gets to participate in a way that they've never been able to before. It's incredibly dynamic. It's scaring everybody to death because it's so dramatically volatile, right? We're all siloed. We're all in our own side. You only listen to the side you want to hear, you don't listen to the other sides and everything. Well, of course, I'm sitting here listening to all the other sides, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, what are they talking about? Of course, we're listening to all the sides, and we're thinking, geez, look at all this stuff going on. You know, Elon Musk out there running X, and all these different people using all this stuff, and new people using AI to create videos that totally are false and make us think, oh gosh, they're just tearing up ballots, and all this, and you think other countries are going to experience this too once they get enough social media and everybody has their own iPhone. And by the way, even the third world countries are getting this. They're getting electricity, with something like down to 8% of the population of the world doesn't have electricity, including the internet. So basically everyone's going to be getting more and more like the United States. So all of these democracies are going to become even more dynamic in the same way we've become. So we're the future. What we're seeing might scare the heck out of a lot of people that feel like it's just uncontrollable, but that's the future. That's the way the future is going to be. We're more of a democracy now with more people participating than ever before, and it's scaring the crap out of all the people that didn't used to have the competition of all these people that aren't participating, right? Right? You think about it. So I'm enthusiastic. I think this is, sure, will there be violence? But by the way, the same kind of statistics points out that there's actually less violence in the world than ever. This is the safest time for you to live on the earth as a person, provided, of course, you're not living in certain places. Don't live in those places, right? You're actually better off. So it's amazing, right? And so when we're trying to think, what's the spirit of the times? The spirit of the times, for Hegel, it was freedom. Freedom was evolving. In the section of the phenomenology, what's happening is by having this kind of dynamic interplay of forces, you are free to choose. I'm myself arguing with myself over whether or not I should have the candy bar or not. I'm the one that gets to pick. So I am making my own choice. Right? In fact, for Hegel, you can't avoid being free. I mean, even if I'm locked in a cell and tied up inside of my own mind, I'm thinking about, should I just relax? I mean, there's not much I can do. I can't get out of here. Should I think about my favorite movie? What should I do? My self-consciousness, as long as I'm not drugged, or unconscious, it's still free. And so by the very nature of a self-consciousness, I'm thinking all the dang time. When can you even get it to stop? You try to go to sleep and fall asleep, and you're thinking about, will I be ready to give them an absolutely dynamic lecture on Hegel tomorrow? Will they be as enthusiastic as I've become? No way. And you think, wait a minute, but if I don't fall asleep, I'm going to be tired and I'm not going to do a good job. So fall asleep. How do you fall asleep? You're thinking too much, because your self-consciousness is free. It's constantly free. Sartre, who's, and I should mention Sir Alfred North Whitehead, who was a colleague, teacher, mentor of Bertrand Russell, and taught Quine, by the way, at Harvard, once said, and I think I can quote it exactly,